me being around the young generations, again, that only helps me. Like when EPMD was on their second album, we were super dope with So What You Saying and The Big Payback, but then we brought K Solo through with, Tell the World My Name and Spellbound and Your Mom's in My Business. Then the next album, when we came with Business as Usual, with Rampage with LL Cool J and Gold Digger, EPMD was dope, but it helped us that we put Redman on because he was young and he was the youth, and then he came with What the Album. And then on our final album, we signed Das EFX, which ended up selling 2 million records on a Dead Serious and 1 million on They Want Effects, which opened it up for the crossover single that Eric and I dropped, which ultimately went gold. So when you keep yourself, it's all about selflessness as opposed to selfishness. When you give back, it comes back to you. That's how it works.
Man, and that's so wonderful to hear all of that and how you have this legacy, and that's what it is.
Yeah, and now that we gave ourselves time, we understand it. It's kind of like when we came in with Run DMC. Run DMC looked out for us, like, Run DMC, EPMD, the logo, DJ Jam Master J, DJ Scratch. So we learned so much from these guys, because they took the time. And, once you give, then you receive. So a lot of times, like, we could be on a show by ourselves, but if Das EFX on the show, it makes it easier. If Keef's on the show, it makes it easier. If Red's on the show, it makes it easier. So again, you have to believe in not what you're seeing, because what's hot today is not going to be hot tomorrow. You got to look at hip hop as a whole. You got to look at the culture and say, okay, this is where it's at. What is it missing? And what can I bring to the table? At least that was our approach. Hip hop's been, great is an understatement to us. So while it was helping us, we always felt compelled to come back with a dope artist that hip hop and the fans could appreciate. What I would prefer is for artists to focus on themselves, because once you get a good look, then, it's like it's a small window of opportunity that closes quick. And either you can focus on yourself and look inside, or you can approach a game where there's really not too much leadership. So, you know what I mean? It's like chasing a train you can't catch. Before, music was made in the basement. Before, you would have to go to the park, plug in electricity to the light pole. Now, there's all of these hip-hop experts, which affects the music, and then people be like, oh, well, should I do a single? Should I do an album? Should I do a mixtape? No, you should do your work, your large body of work, because one album is not enough. You see how we had to crank out Strictly Business, Unfinished Business, Business as Usual, Business Never Personal. So once you do come with a hit record, people want more and more and more and more until you run out. So my advice to artists is it's the way you feed the hip hop culture. Consistency is the most important thing in hip hop. So you can have your whole body of work. In my opinion, I would have my album, I would have my mixtape, I would have my single, I would have my video ready, I would have my social media on point. And then when I'm ready to present myself or my group to the hip hop culture, it's like I'm unraveling work that I already did for the next 4 years. You know what I mean? As opposed to approaching, like, scratching my head. Should I do the mixtape first? Should I do the album first? Should I do the single? No, just do you and what you feel. It's still a brand new culture.
Right, absolutely. Bring it from within.
Exactly. Not from what you see.
Now, you mentioned making music in the basement, which, of course, to me, reminds me of independent rap, which is, why we're here. And, of course, EPMD, to a lot of people, was independent before independent was the route to go. Now everyone wants to be independent, but back then maybe not everyone recommended it. So what did it mean to be independent in that era of rap?
A lot more flexibility, a lot more control, a lot more creative control. Okay, so when you're on the independent, half the hip hop business was built off the independent, not major. Okay, so Run DMC came in on Profile Records. We came in on Sleeping Bag Records. Big Daddy Kane and Biz Markie and the Juice Crew came in Cold Chillin' Records. KRS-One, he came in on the label that he came in, Rock Him. They all was independent. But then as the industry began to grow, then we put together the Hit Squad. Then we signed a group like Das EFX with Bump Skiddity Bump that sold 2 million records. So the majors started giving the hip hop culture a better look. And then when it converted, it went from independent to major. And then with the merge of technology, then bang, it shifted back to independent, where you have more flexibility, more control, and more creativity. But the foundation of hip hop was started off the independent scene.
And that's so crazy to me, seeing where hip hop started, because now it seems like a lot of artists, especially the younger guys, are just always chasing after a deal.
Yeah, because they don't, that's, again, they got to do their homework. That's hip hop 101. And I also got to throw in their Priority Records, which was really a force to be reckoned with on the West Coast with Ice-T, NWA, Ice Cube. So again, if you're coming in for the long haul, then, this is the business where you have to know what's going on. If you're coming in for the short term, then you chase a deal with the majors, and it's not guaranteed. You could have a whole bunch of hype and a release date, and then right when you get to the release date, you get shelved. Whereas if you take the independent, you're able, hey, I want to release a single, I want to release an album, I want to release a mixtape. You have direct contact with your fan base as opposed to having to go through a second party.
Absolutely. The control of the rollout, of the album rollout, and the content that's going out there on the independent game, it's so much greater.
Yeah, because you got to understand when you're dealing with a major, and majors are good too. It's all according to what type of contract you have. If you have a contract with a major that allows you to have creative control, then you can make moves. But if you don't have a contract like that, then you're in trouble, because then you can make a smash hit. You can have the right, image that you want the hip hop culture to perceive. But then once you start dealing with the majors, they'd be like, hey, well, maybe you should cut your hair. Maybe you should change your clothes. That hi-hat's a little too loud and maybe a little too much bass. Hey, once you put a singer in the hook, they start messing with the creativity, which affects the perception of you when you roll out to the hip hop culture.
Right, and you mentioned creative control and being able to control these different aspects of your career. And I know one of the most dreaded things that gets brought up a lot with artists signing deals is the 360 deal. And so I was wondering what your thoughts are on the pros and cons. Are there any pros to that?
Basically, the difference between a major 360 deal and independent is on a 360 deal, you risk giving up a large percent of your publishing, a large percent of your royalty, merchandising, touring. Whereas on the other hand, when you do independent, everything is 100% yours, and you put yourself in a position to remove yourself from the royalty, which at tops you get $1.09 nowadays, or $1.50, because it was real crucial back there, as opposed to the independent route of working directly with a distribution company. So one, you get $1 record, $1.50, and you got to give away half your stuff. The other, distribution, as you all well know, they take about $1.50, $2 or $3. But if a CD's retailed at $10, then you make $7 a record off of every unit that you sell, and in return, you can sell less records and make more money.
Right. Now, when you say royalties, I think one of the things that artists aren't completely in tune with is how royalties and how mechanicals work. Can you explain and elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, royalties is like every time you sell a record, the publisher gets paid, okay, and the producer gets paid, and the writer gets paid. So to be very clear, in the industry, Eric and I were super blessed because we came with the perception that you thought you produced your own music and wrote your own lyrics. So in return, we came with our own sound. But as we begin to come up in hip hop, we learned there's some situations where artists have a ghost writer and a ghost producer, which means you don't write your rhymes. Somebody else writes them and you just recite them. You don't produce your music. Somebody else produce your music and you just, rap over their track. Now, if you have a ghostwriter, then what you do is you forfeit all your writer's credit, so you don't get nothing for that because somebody wrote that. And if you forfeit your producer's credit, you don't get nothing for that because somebody produced that. But if you write it, then you get paid your publishing and your mechanicals. If you produce it, then you get paid your publishing and your mechanicals. But if you on a major and you sign away 75% of your publishing and 75% of your production and your merchandise, then you're only left with 25% from the jump. So if you have a sample in there, or if somebody else wrote or produced your music, then chances are you're going to get nothing out of that song or that entire album. Whereas if you produce it, as if you write it, and then you release it yourself, now you're dealing with 100% pub, 100% mechanical, and 100% royalty. And that's the difference. One, you get like $1.50 on a major record to be clear. The other, you just got to pay the distribution fee to whatever distribution company chooses to release your music. So to be clear, if the CD sells for $10 and your distribution company wants $2 every record, that leaves you $8. Okay? So on a major, if you go platinum, but you don't own half your stuff, chances are you're just going to get another shot to do another album. But on independent, you sell 200,000 records times 8. You pretty much can do the math from there. That's 1.6, and that's you.
Right, man. I'm glad you elaborated on that, because I think a lot of these cats aren't familiar with a lot of those terms or the way that all works.
Yeah, and $1.50 I think is on the high end. You know, when we signed our record deal with Sleeping Bag Records, I think we got like 68 cents a record, and then it went up. But then the 360 kicked in. So you're kind of gated, whereas in the independent, you start with 100%. And in the game, you know, like working with Russell Simmons, Leo Cohen, learning from Steve Rifkin, being part of the RBC staff with Bryant, Ben, you know, and Fred, these are guys who's been in the game for, forget it, at least 3 decades. You know, half the Priority staff, half the Def Jam staff. So on top of you having talent, you also got to align yourself with people who have this experience on the independent level in the game. That's the tough one for up and coming artists, is to realize, like, hey, do you want to get $1 record, or do you want to put yourself in a position to get $4, $5, $6, $7, $8 a record and then have creative control? But if you ain't ready and your team ain't correct, then, you know, then chances of you making it is slim to none. But if you got a good team, then you can make it. But you got to understand, one of the big things in the independent game is you just got to keep reinvesting your money into yourself. But it pays off in the long run. Right.
And that's, you know, that's how so many of these indie cats are surviving these days.
Yeah, it's going down. And like I said, again, you know, Tech Nine is a perfect example of that, you know. And there's a couple of other artists out there, like in my day, that took the independent route just by selling records out of the trunk. They moved like 10,000 records out of the trunk by themselves, with no video, with no marketing promotion, and no radio. So once a major connects to that, then if you sold 10,000 by yourself, then once you have a huge backing behind you, your record sales go up.
That's what it is, man.
You can murk yourself before you get started.
Yeah.
You'd be like, oh, shoot, I just gave away 75% of my publishing, 75% of my merchandise, 75% of my production, and, you know, 75% of my touring revenue. That's the whole independent scene. That's the reason why touring is so lucrative, because you get to go out and have a one-on-one relationship with your fans. They respond to you in according to your show. So if you got a trash show, ain't nobody coming up to see you at the end of the show for merchandise or to see what you're doing next. But if you have a exciting show with a tremendous amount of energy, then after the show, you get to get your merch game on, conversate with the fans so they can let you know how excited they are about you releasing new music or following you to the next state or country. You got to understand, we have some people who drive through like 10 states just to come see one of our shows. I mean, we've been in situations where me and Eric have bought hotel rooms for fans, because after the show, they'd be like, hey, yo, I drove all the way from Ohio to see you. And the show was in New York.
Wow.
You know, so the biggest problem and the worst thing an artist can do is not be conscious of the efforts of the people around you supporting your music. You got to be open-minded, not closed-minded.
Right, and I think the ability to navigate that nowadays is it's you know, the artist is much closer to all of these resources than ever before. Now, in your case, you mentioned the publishing was bad on your first 2 albums. Was that something that when you signed you were aware of, or is publishing and all the aspects of that, is that something that you learned as you moved throughout your career?
No, that's something that I learned as I moved through my career, because in the beginning it was just hip hop, excitement. You know, a lot of cats got to know the history of hip hop, and that's the problem with the generation today. Like, they don't really know the original origin. Whereas when we came in, we was just excited to get on because we seen King Tim III. We seen Grandmaster Flash. We seen DJ African Bambaataa. We heard KRS-One and Rakim, I Came Through the Door, Slick Rick, Lottie Dottie. So it was like a trip, a class trip that you was hoping you can get a ticket to get on. And you didn't know nothing about the business. You had to learn as you went along.
Man, that's so crazy. You bring up all these classic names. You know, when you look at the stage that rap is at right now, and more so indie hip hop, what kind of changes do you see between now and when you were releasing your first album, your second album?
Well, the changes I see, like we was aware. We was aware of Run DMC. We was aware of Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. We was aware of Public Enemy, you know. And not only when we was making the music, we would run into like Rakim, Big Daddy Kane at shows. So these was kind of like our big brothers that was teaching us the rope, like Jam Master Jay. You know, if we didn't know something, then we had people that we can go to, but we knew the history. As of today, this generation is making the music and you can't knock them, you know. Because like they said, that's like back there if Run DMC came into our session and said, hey, it's my thing, sounds okay, but you should change it. Or the Headbanger sounds okay, but you should change it. Or Rampage sounds okay, but you should change it. Like, you know, they wouldn't have done that because they know we was making the music that we felt from our heart. And that's the same thing that this generation's doing, but only they don't have the history of the foundation which allows them to make the music in this time. That's the downside from them, but they kind of learning because it's doing the shift again. Right. It's going back to independent. You know, I'm on the phone with, you know, all of these DJs across the planet, and our new radio stations are popping up. And the young generation of this generation, they no longer want to support the music that does not represent the hip hop culture. So they're tired of hearing it, and now they want to visually see the artists from the golden era live in performance. That's why our show's been packed. You know, we've been on the Master Ceremonies tour, the Golden Era tour, you know, just getting back in from Chicago, and these shows are packed.
I'm glad you mentioned the touring, because one of the things that I'm most impressed by is just how many live shows you do still to this day. And I think that that's one of the most overlooked things for artists. You know, they don't really tap into that market. What does it mean to you to be able to still go out there and rock these live shows?
It's everything, because, you know, like as an artist, a new artist, when you have success and you're doing a lot of traveling and people know you, you can have a tendency to isolate yourself. That's one of the hugest problems in music. You know, people get big and then they go into isolation. But by touring, when you get on a plane and when you go to a packed live show, now you run into people and fans and business people and promoters that'd be like, yo, remember I brought you out here in 1988 and we played at so-and-so? Or, yo, remember 1990 when you was out there on the LL Cool J tour and we brought you in there? So it allows you to get hands-on information and great energy to come back home, to go in the studio and create something in the now, in the present, as opposed to just sitting from wherever you at and producing and releasing music from your own perception.
We were talking about this generation of rap, this generation of young cats, and with it comes all the advances that have come with the rap game. And of course, I'm talking about the digital age and social media and those kinds of things. How has someone like yourself carried your brand into 2015 as far as social media and connecting with fans?
Well, now it's totally different. That's a great question. Before there was Serato, DJs had to carry all of those crates to the shows and DJs, or carry them to the club and DJ. Okay, before there was the social media, when we were dropping albums, Strictly Business, Unfinished Business, or Redman, or Das Effects, or K Solo, you know, or Keith Murray, we would have to go on a real promotional tour and hit about 30 cities, you know, hit about 30 countries, just to let our fans know that our album is coming. Now, through social media, you get on your laptop, you get on your PC, you hit a couple of buttons, and everybody across the planet knows what you're doing. So with the Serato and the technology, you don't got to carry the crates because it's all in your Mac. Okay, when you roll your album out, now, instead of having to go to Philly and Baltimore and DC and Germany and Italy, yo, you have your social media, you have your Twitter, you have your Facebook, you have your Instagram, and there's more social media networks popping up. So you got to let the technology work for you, because it's not just us and EPMD. We had the Hit Squad, we had the Dev Squad, so you still have Das Effects out there, you still have Keith out there, you still have Redman out there with Method Man. So it kind of keeps us grounded and connected. So we're taking the energy from our era and connecting it with the energy of this era and letting the social media work for us.
Now, with social media, you know, it's such a breeding ground for young talent. And I know you, like I said earlier, you work with a lot of young talent. What is one of the most common mistakes that an up-and-coming indie artist could make?
The biggest mistake they could make is really not believing in themselves from the business aspect and not taking the time to understand what the music business is about. Hip Hop 101. You have to do your due diligence. You have to know what the big word recoup means, because a lot of artists come in there and their record do good, so they think they rolling by the perception, like this guy had a hit, so it worked for him. You know, it's like when we was watching Yo MTV Raps back there, and every artist who came on had a big fat chain on. Then when we came in, we was like, yo, we need to change, we need to whip. But what the artists don't know is all of those videos that you're shooting, at the end, you got to pay that back. All of those planes you're flying in out on promotion, yo, you got to pay that back. Those big studios that you're going into, like without your music prepared, eating lunch, eating dinner, hanging out with your boys, that comes out of your royalty. So if you knew all of that, then maybe you wouldn't be flying with 10 cats, okay? Maybe you wouldn't be getting 10 hotel rooms. You know, you would be adjusting, because you will know that you're responsible to pay that back at the end. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes for new artists coming in the independent game, because you can make $1 million independent, but then if you got to recoup 800 for promotion, then what did you really make?
Exactly. And you know what? In 2015, I'm not so sure that even the major labels are putting out that much money for a lot of these young artists.
No, that's why it's kind of changed now, and it's kind of different. And it all boils down to how big is hip hop in your heart? How far are you really, really willing to go to represent the hip hop culture? Because now it changes. You know, all the EPMD album titles are business, because that's what it is. So now the business changed. Before, we used to make a demo. Please listen to my demo. You go to Manhattan, you shop it, then you get on, you give your album to the record company, they'll do the work and put it out. Now it's totally different. Now it's the business game. If you believe in yourself, you have to invest in your independent company. You have to invest in your music. You have to invest in your studio. Then if you get a buzz, then you get the look, and then you get the big phone call. But it's monitored by Twitter, it's monitored by Instagram, and it's monitored by YouTube. So you have to do the work now to get the look. But there's nothing wrong with that. Because if you're building a big independent scene and you got your buzz on YouTube and you got your buzz on Twitter and you got your buzz on Instagram, you're already up and running. Now the question is, if a company wants to merge with you, how could you benefit and how could the company benefit? Because you already up and running. Is this going to help me? Or is
It's a scenario, and it actually leads me to my next question. Let's say you're an artist and you've got your buzz up, and a label or a company wants to come and work with you. What kind of team do you then have to assemble to make sure that you have the right kind of people around you and that you're doing the right things? What are we talking about? Lawyers, managers, accountants?
Yeah, we're talking about the whole structure, like a whole team ready to go, you know, a one-stop. So that's why when they approach you, you be like, I already have my attorney. I already have my accountant. You know, I already have somebody to look into samples. I already have somebody for the art department. I already have somebody for marketing and promotion. I already have somebody with radio. So you're self-contained. So what can happen is, if you do a deal, all you're doing is merging with a major. You know, it's kind of like in the old Def Jam days. Def Jam was signed to Columbia. Def Jam was signed to Sony. Def Jam was signed to Polygram. Then Def Jam signed to Universal. But Def Jam was self-contained. So whenever they signed to a major, the company and the workers within that company would merge with the workers within inside of Def Jam, and they would work together for the project to be the best that it could actually be. So again, you want to have your own team. That's the whole point. That's why they buying it, because you already up your YouTube game, your Twitter game, your records are moving, your sound scan, you know, your when they play it on the radio, when you get all your spins and stuff like that. So, you know, that's what they're buying into. But if you don't have no structure, then you're just at the mercy of the new label you signed to, and it defeats the whole purpose, because they're looking for you to take them to the next level.